A woman stood alone at a bus stop. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, trying to trap whatever warmth was left in her body. She wore a plain black dress, no coat, and her heels were soaked from the slushy puddles beneath her feet. Her hair clung to her face as if even it was trying to hide from the cold. She didn't ask for help. She just stood there, still, quiet, and shivering. A few feet away, a young man named Aiden stepped out of a nearby convenience store. His jacket was zipped up, and steam puffed from his mouth every time he exhaled. He wasn't rich, not by a long shot. He worked double shifts at the repair shop down the street and delivered food in the evenings just to keep the lights on in his small apartment. His shoes were worn out at the soles, and he had patched up the elbow of his jacket more times than he could count. But that night, none of that mattered. He looked at the woman from a distance, noticed her trembling hands, the way her shoulders shook with every gust of wind, and something inside him just couldn't look away. Without hesitation, he crossed the street and approached her slowly. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask what she was doing out there so late, so vulnerable, so alone. He simply unzipped his jacket, slipped it off, and held it out to her. "You look cold," he said gently. "Please, take this." For a moment, she didn't move. She just stared at him like she wasn't sure if he was real, or if kindness like that still existed in the world. Then slowly, she reached out with trembling fingers and took the jacket. Her lips parted in what might have been the beginning of a thank you, but no sound came out. She wrapped herself in the oversized coat, her shoulders finally dropping just a little, as if she had been holding the weight of the entire night on them until that very moment. Aiden didn't wait for a thank you. He just nodded once and began to walk away, stuffing his hands into his pockets as the wind bit at his now bare arms. He didn't know who she was, didn't know what she had been through, or why her eyes looked like they had seen too much pain in too little time. And he certainly didn't know that his small act of kindness would echo far beyond that freezing night. What he didn't see, what no one saw, was the sleek black car parked just around the corner. Inside, a man in a crisp suit sat watching through the windshield, his expression unreadable. He had been searching for her for hours. The woman pulled the jacket tighter around herself and took a slow breath, her eyes still fixed on the man disappearing into the night. She whispered something under her breath, a name, maybe, or a prayer, and then the car headlights flicked on. The quiet moment was gone. That was the last time Aiden thought he'd ever see her. He returned to his apartment, alone and still cold, but oddly at peace. That night felt different. He didn't know why. Maybe because he hadn't ignored someone in need. Maybe because for once, despite having so little, he gave something that mattered. The next morning, he went back to his routine. Coffee from a cheap machine, keys jingling in his backpack, a worn-out beanie on his head. He didn't expect anything to come of the night before. People pass through cities like ghosts, and acts of kindness often go unnoticed. But the woman he helped wasn't just anyone. She was Amelia Westwood, CEO of Westcorp, a name that echoed through corporate boardrooms and financial markets across the country. A woman known for her power, wealth, and ruthless business decisions. No one in the public I had seen her in months. Rumors swirled. Scandal, illness, disappearance. But there she had been, in the middle of the night, on a street where no one would think to look. No one except for Aiden. He didn't know her name, didn't recognize her face. To him, she was just someone who needed warmth. But to her, he had become something else entirely. Later that week, something strange began to happen. Aiden received a call from an unknown number. He ignored it. Then came an envelope under his door, sealed with no return address. Inside was a letter, handwritten. The words were simple. "You didn't ask who I was. You just helped. I haven't forgotten." There was no name signed at the bottom, just a date and a time. Confused, Aiden almost threw it away. but something told him not to. That day, things started shifting in his life. The repair shop offered him a position he hadn't applied for. His landlord, who had been threatening eviction, suddenly changed his tone. Even the grumpy man who ran the sandwich shop next door handed him a free meal with a wink. And then the date on the letter arrived. Aiden stood outside a glass building that touched the sky. It was the kind of place people like him never entered unless they were fixing the plumbing. But the guard at the front door greeted him by name. An elevator was waiting. The ride to the top floor was silent, tense, surreal. When the doors opened, he stepped into a space flooded with light, lined with windows overlooking the entire city. And there she was, the woman from the bus stop, except she wasn't shivering anymore. She was dressed in white, commanding the room even as she sat silently behind a sleek marble desk. Her eyes met his with a warmth that didn't exist that cold night. She stood, walked slowly toward him, and extended her hand. "I never forgot what you did," she said softly. "And I think it's time someone changed your life, the way you changed mine." But what came next, what she offered him, was something even he couldn't have imagined. And it would turn everything he thought he knew about his own life upside down. Aiden didn't speak right away. He couldn't. The moment felt too big, too unreal. The woman who had stood shivering under that broken street lamp just days ago now stood before him, radiant, composed, and powerful. Her presence filled the room like sunlight, confident, quiet, but impossible to ignore. He still hadn't asked her name. Not then, not now. But the look in her eyes told him everything had changed. She smiled gently, sensing his confusion, maybe even his disbelief. "My name is Amelia," she said softly. "Amelia Westwood." He didn't react. The name didn't mean much to him. Not at first. "I run this company," she continued, turning slightly to gesture at the sprawling office behind her. "I built it from nothing, just like I suspect you've been building your life." Aiden's throat felt dry. He swallowed hard. I fix things. At Thompson's garage," he said, unsure why he felt the need to explain himself. "I know," she replied. Those two words hit harder than he expected. She knew. She had looked into him. Somehow, someway, in the short time since that night, she had learned who he was, where he worked, what kind of life he lived, and maybe, just maybe, what kind of man he really was. "I'm not here to scare you," Amelia said, taking a step closer, her tone sincere. "That night, I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't supposed to be seen. But you didn't see me the way others do. You saw a person, and that mattered more than you could ever know." Aiden looked around the room. Glass walls, expensive artwork, a city view most people only dreamt about. He felt like he didn't belong. His hands, still rough from work, clenched slightly by his side. "Why were you out there?" he asked finally, his voice quieter than before. "Why alone? No security? No driver?" Amelia hesitated. That same flicker he'd seen in her eyes at the bus stop returned. The pain, the weight, but this time she didn't hide it. "I was running away," she admitted, "from a decision I didn't want to make. From people who only see me as a position, not a person. That night, I just needed to disappear. But I wasn't expecting the world to feel that cold." She paused and looked directly into his eyes. "And then you gave me your jacket." He didn't know what to say. The moment had felt so small to him, just something anyone with a heart would have done. But to her, it had clearly meant everything. Amelia walked slowly to a table near the window. There was something resting on it, neatly folded. Aiden recognized it immediately. His jacket. The same one he had patched so many times. The one that had shielded him from countless winters. She lifted it gently and walked back toward him. "I kept it," she said, "and I had it cleaned, repaired. I hope that's okay." He nodded. It's more than okay. Amelia smiled, but her eyes were still hiding something. Something deeper. Something that hadn't yet been said. She took a breath, as if she were choosing her words carefully. I've been watching you, Aiden. Not in a strange way, but I had someone look into your life. I wanted to understand what kind of person gives without expecting anything in return. And what I found is someone who's always done that. You help your neighbor carry groceries. You cover shifts for coworkers who are struggling. You fix people's cars and sometimes don't charge them when they can't afford it. I just do what I can, Aiden muttered. She nodded. And most people don't. There was silence again, thick and unspoken. I'm offering you something, Amelia said, finally breaking it. A job. Here. A fresh start. A real one. But not because you gave me your jacket. Not as some kind of reward. I'm offering it because I believe someone like you could change things from the inside. And because, honestly, I need someone around who reminds me what it means to be human. Aiden blinked. The air felt thinner now. What kind of job? He asked, unsure whether this was a test or a dream. Something flexible. We'll start simple. Assistant to the outreach director. Pays well. Comes with benefits. Housing if you need it. She smiled again. And no, you won't have to wear a suit. He wanted to laugh, but the moment was still too heavy. Why me? He asked. You could have picked anyone. Someone with experience. Someone who knows what they're doing. Amelia looked out the window, her voice lower this time. Because the people I've picked in the past? They're the reason I was out there alone that night. That sentence hung in the air like a slow-moving storm. She didn't explain further, and he didn't ask. But he understood enough. Power doesn't always bring safety. Wealth doesn't always buy loyalty. And sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who leave you standing in the cold. Aiden looked down at the floor, his mind spinning. Could he do this? Could he really step into a world so far from his own? Before he could answer, the door to the office opened without warning. A man in a sleek gray suit stepped in, frowning. His eyes darted to Aiden, then to Amelia. You asked not to be disturbed, he said curtly. Amelia's posture shifted immediately. It's fine, Mark. We're done. The man's jaw tightened. He gave Aiden a sharp look before backing out of the room without a word. Aiden turned back to her. That guy doesn't look too happy. He rarely is, she replied with a smirk. But don't worry about him. Worry about you. What do you want, Aiden? Not what you think you deserve. What do you really want? That question pierced deeper than anything else she'd said. He had spent most of his life not wanting too much. Just enough to get by. Just enough to survive. But now, something was shifting. He looked back at her, eyes unsure but heart somehow steady. I don't know yet, he said honestly, but I think I'm ready to find out. Amelia gave the smallest nod. Then take the first step. But before he could say another word, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and in that second her expression changed. The warmth faded. She quickly turned off the screen and placed the phone face down on the desk. Something was wrong, and whatever it was, it hadn't gone away. Aiden noticed it, the tension, the flicker of fear. He didn't ask. Not yet. But deep down he knew this wasn't just about a jacket. Aiden couldn't stop thinking about the way her face changed when she saw that message. Just a second earlier, she had looked calm, confident, even warm. But after glancing at her phone, something shifted in her. Her shoulders tensed, her smile vanished, and her eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes, grew distant. He didn't press her about it, but the moment stayed with him like a splinter under the skin. He walked out of that building with his old jacket folded under his arm and a new opportunity that didn't feel real yet. The following days moved strangely. Amelia's assistant called him the next morning, already setting up his onboarding. A driver came to pick him up the next day. He was shown to a temporary apartment near the Westcorp building. Fully furnished, stocked with groceries, and more luxurious than any place he'd ever lived. It didn't feel like his life. It felt like he'd stepped into someone else's. Still, Aiden kept reminding himself that none of this happened because he earned it. It happened because he was in the right place at the wrong time, or maybe the wrong place at the right time. Either way, it wasn't luck. Felt like something bigger and more dangerous. His new job didn't start with much responsibility. For now, he shadowed Amelia's outreach director, a kind but distant woman named Mara. She gave him a stack of folders and told him to familiarize himself with the company's community initiatives. He noticed quickly that while Westcorp publicly claimed to help struggling families, local businesses, and shelters, the reality was far messier. The budgets didn't match the outcomes. Some of the reports were incomplete. Some donations didn't seem to reach the people they were meant for. Aiden didn't say anything at first. He wasn't sure if this was just corporate disorganization or something worse. Then came the whispers. Late one evening, while Aiden stayed after hours to organize files, a janitor named Leo struck up a conversation. Leo was in his 60s, quiet but observant. He pointed toward one of the outreach photos in a glossy company brochure. "Funny thing about that," Leo said, nodding. "They say they built a new shelter in Southridge, but that building's been empty for months. I pass it on my route." Aiden looked at him. Empty. Not a soul. Just boarded up windows and cameras on every corner. Doesn't feel right. That night, Aiden went home and looked it up. The address matched. The Westcorp press release claimed it was a shelter for single mothers. The ribbon-cutting photo featured Amelia herself. But the street view told a different story. The place was shuttered. Silent. The next morning, he asked Mara about it. She didn't look surprised. "That project was frozen due to zoning issues," she said quickly, avoiding his eyes. "We're still figuring things out." But her tone lacked conviction. Aiden didn't press further, yet. The deeper he went, the more questions surfaced. And through it all, he hadn't seen Amelia again. It had been nearly a week since their meeting in her office. No calls. No emails. Not even a passing glimpse. Every time he asked, her staff would say she was in meetings, traveling, or unavailable. Still, he felt her presence everywhere. Her name was etched on the walls. Her decisions shaped every corner of the building. But something told Aiden she wasn't just busy. She was hiding, or being hidden. One night, as he stepped out onto the balcony of his apartment to clear his head, he noticed a black SUV parked across the street. It wasn't the first time he'd seen it. Same spot, same dark windows. It never stayed long, never made a scene, but it always seemed to appear when he got home late. He shrugged it off at first. Maybe it was security. Maybe it was nothing. But the next day, he received a plain white envelope slipped under his apartment door. No name. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the same SUV, parked in front of the shuttered Southridge shelter. No message. Just that. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Aiden lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. What had he stepped into? Who was really running things at Westcorp? And what role did Amelia play in all of this? The next day, Mara pulled him aside after a staff meeting. Her face looked pale, her voice hushed. "Whatever you're doing, stop." Aiden blinked. "I'm just doing what you told me." "Reading, organizing?" She shook her head. "You're asking questions. And someone's noticed." He wanted to ask who. He wanted to demand answers. But Mara didn't wait. She walked away quickly, disappearing into the crowd of employees filing out of the conference room. Later that afternoon, he received an internal email flagged with "confidential" in the subject line. contained no text, just a calendar invite for a private meeting. The sender, Amelia. It was scheduled for that night. Off-site. A cafe on the far edge of the city. One that stayed open late and didn't attract attention. Aiden arrived early. The place was nearly empty. Just a barista wiping down the counter and a couple of students tapping away on laptops. He chose a booth near the back and waited. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Just as he was about to leave, the door opened and Amelia walked in. Hooded coat, no makeup, tired eyes. She slid into the seat across from him and took off her hood. "I didn't want to meet at the office," she said quietly. "Too many ears." Aiden leaned in. "What's going on?" She looked around, then back at him. "You're in the middle of something you weren't supposed to find." "I wasn't trying to dig," he said. "Things just don't add up." "They never did," she whispered. "But now they're watching you too." He felt the weight of that settle in his chest. "There are people in this company, people I once trusted, who are using Westcorp to move money, silence projects, erase trails. That shelter in Southridge? It was never built to house families. It's a front." He stared at her. "So, you knew." "I found out too late," she said, pain flickering across her face. "And by then, it was safer to play along." He leaned forward. "Why tell me now?" "Because someone slipped up. The photo you received, I didn't send it, but I know who did. Someone on the inside is trying to bring this all down. Quietly. Safely. And they think I can help?" Amelia nodded slowly. "They think you already are." Aiden felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't just about corporate fraud or broken promises. It was bigger, deeper, more dangerous. She lowered her voice. "You still have a choice. You can walk away from this. Pretend it never happened. Go back to the garage. The life you had." He didn't respond, because something told him walking away wasn't really an option anymore. Not now. Not after everything he had seen. Aiden stared across the small cafe table, his fingers tightening around the edge of his cup. The noise of the world around him. Coffee machines humming, spoons clinking against glass, faint music playing overhead. All of it faded into a dull blur. His mind was fixed on one thing. The way Amelia's eyes didn't flinch when she told him the truth. That this wasn't just about bad paperwork or sloppy management. This was corruption, hidden in plain sight, inside a company everyone trusted. And now, somehow, he was part of it. He swallowed hard. "So what happens next?" Amelia's voice was steady but low. "There's someone else. Someone who's been collecting evidence for months. A man on the inside who knew what was going on but couldn't act alone. He thought if he could get you to notice something, if someone from outside the power circle started asking questions, it might force a shift." "Who is he?" Aiden asked. "I can't say his name here," she replied. "But he's close. He left the photo at your door." Aiden nodded slowly. The photo, the black SUV, the shelter, all of it connected. "You trust him?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know what we're up against. And I know we can't do it alone." As they left the cafe, the cold air hit them like a warning. Aiden glanced around, no black SUVs, no strangers watching. But he couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were always somewhere, just out of reach. Amelia gave him a burner phone and told him to wait for a message. "It'll come when it's safe," she said before disappearing down the street alone. Back at his apartment, Aiden couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound outside his window. For the first time in years, he felt scared, not of poverty or loneliness or failure, but of what would happen if he did nothing. He had seen too much now, known too much, and walking away didn't feel like an option anymore. The next morning, the message came. A single line, "Storage level B3, midnight, come alone." It was sent from a blocked number. Aiden hesitated for hours. He paced his apartment, tried to convince himself it wasn't worth it. But something in him wouldn't sit still. That feeling that had driven him to give a stranger his jacket, that urge to act when no one else would, it wouldn't let him stay silent now. At exactly midnight, Aiden entered the underground parking lot beneath the Westcorp headquarters. The air was cold and dry. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly. Level B3 was dimly lit, half empty, lined with storage units and maintenance access doors. He walked carefully, his footsteps echoing. Then he saw him. A man stepped out from the shadows near a utility closet. Mid-40s, slim build, glasses, dressed like someone who had tried too hard not to stand out. He didn't say his name, just nodded. "You've seen enough to know it's real now," the man said, his voice calm. "I've been documenting things for 6 months. Money transfers, fake invoices, phantom shelters. All of it leads back to one group inside the company." "Who?" Aiden asked. "They go by initials in the records, WDR. It's not a name. It's a group. Westwood Development Restructure. Sounds legitimate, right? But it's not. It's a cover. They've been bleeding the company dry from the inside." "And Amelia?" Aiden asked. "She wasn't part of it, but she was a risk. She tried to shut one project down last year. The day after, she was locked out of several internal systems. Her calendar started being managed for her. Decisions made behind her back. She got boxed in." Aiden exhaled slowly. "So why me?" "Because they don't see you coming," the man said. "You're not on their radar yet. But if you keep digging, if you help me expose them, we might be able to bring this entire thing down." Before Aiden could reply, the garage lights suddenly cut off. Everything plunged into darkness. The man froze. "That's not good." Seconds later, a sharp clatter echoed through the space. Metal slamming against concrete. Footsteps. Heavy. Rushed. "Run," the man whispered. Aiden turned and bolted, heart pounding. He didn't know where he was going, just away. The emergency lights flicked on in patches, casting eerie red glows across the floor. Shadows moved in and out of view. At one point, he looked back and saw 2 men in dark suits rushing after them. He ducked into a side corridor and slammed the door shut behind him, locking it with a metal latch. His chest heaved with each breath. He could still hear footsteps, but fainter now. After minutes that felt like hours, he slipped out through a side stairwell and exited into an alley across from the building. The man who had met him in the garage was gone, and now Aiden was fully in it. No more questions. No more safe spaces. The next morning, Aiden didn't go to the office. Instead, he took the burner phone and sent a single message. "I'm in. What's next?" The reply came almost instantly. "We need the files. You'll find them in the offline archive. Level 21. Hard copies only." He knew what that meant. Risk. Real risk. Breaking into secured storage on the executive level. And if he was caught, they wouldn't just fire him, they'd erase him. But something inside him had already shifted. This wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't even just about Amelia. It was about the people those shelters were meant to help. The ones who never got the funds. The ones who were used as names on fake spreadsheets. The mothers. The kids. The veterans. The people the world always forgot. Later that night, he slipped into the building using his staff badge. The lobby was quiet. Too quiet. He avoided security cameras where he could, ducking behind support beams and maintenance carts. Reaching level 21 meant using a service elevator. He waited, counting seconds like heartbeats. As the doors opened, he stepped in and found himself face to face with someone he didn't expect. Mark, the same cold-eyed man who had interrupted Amelia's first meeting with him. Aiden froze. Mark smiled faintly. "Going somewhere?" Aiden's mouth went dry. He didn't answer. Mark stepped in beside him, pressed the button for level 21 himself. And as the doors closed slowly behind them, locking them both into that narrow space, Aiden finally realized he might not make it out this time. The elevator hummed softly as it climbed, but inside, the silence was sharp. Aiden's heart pounded against his chest, his palms cold with sweat. Mark stood beside him with a stillness that was almost unnatural. His hands were folded, but his eyes, they stayed fixed on the silver doors, like a man pretending not to notice the tension crackling beside him. Aiden didn't dare move, didn't speak. He tried to keep his breathing steady, but every second felt like borrowed time. When the elevator finally dinged at level 21, Mark stepped out first. He didn't look back. "Let's walk," he said coolly. Aiden followed. The corridor was long, lined with security-keyed glass doors and motion-activated lights. There were no windows.
No noise.
Just the quiet click of Mark's polished shoes and the hesitant footsteps Aiden forced himself to take. They reached a metal door at the end of the hallway, one labeled Archive 21A. Mark pulled a keycard from his coat and tapped it against the panel. The lock clicked open. He pushed the door and they stepped inside. The room was chilled, almost like a freezer. Rows of tall filing cabinets stretched in every direction. A few computer terminals blinked in standby mode along the wall. And in the center, an old wooden desk with 2 chairs. Mark walked over and sat, motioning for Aiden to do the same. "I assume," Mark began, his tone as sharp as a knife, "that you've been talking to someone." Aiden didn't respond. He kept his face unreadable, even as the fear started to creep up his spine. "I'm going to save us both some time," Mark continued. "We know who's been feeding you information. We know what you were told. And we know you came here tonight to take something." Aiden looked down at the desk. "Then why am I still breathing?" Mark let out a short laugh. "Because some people still see value in you. Amelia, for one. And me, I'm undecided." He leaned forward, eyes locked. "You want to be a hero? Fine. But understand this, what's happening inside this company goes far beyond fake shelters and redirected funds. There are partners involved. Governments. Money from places you don't even want to imagine. You think you've found corruption? You've only seen the wrapping paper." Aiden clenched his fists. "Then why not stop it? Because the moment you try, the people behind it will cut the thread and everything will collapse. And that collapse won't just touch Westcorp. It'll burn lives, reputations, entire communities. People will suffer more than they already have. You want that on your conscience." It was a trap, a subtle threat, hidden beneath the tone of reason. Mark wasn't trying to convince him, he was trying to scare him into silence. But Aiden had already come too far. "So what now?" he asked, his voice barely steady. "You let me walk out of here and pretend none of this happened?" Mark didn't answer immediately. He stood, walked to one of the file cabinets, and pulled out a thick brown folder. He tossed it onto the desk in front of Aiden. "You want proof? Fine. Take it. But read it carefully. Because once you do, you'll understand why some truths are better buried." Then he walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. Aiden sat alone, staring at the folder. He hesitated for a long time before opening it. Inside were printed documents, wire transfers, black and white photographs. Some blurry, some horrifyingly clear. One showed crates being loaded into trucks under the Westcorp logo. Another, receipts tied to offshore accounts. There were names on the files, government officials, fake companies, executives he'd never heard of. But what made his blood run cold was one photo near the end of the pile. It was of Amelia, but not the version he knew. This one showed her standing beside a man in a suit with a blurred-out face, shaking hands over a document stamped, "WDR Confidential." The date was from 2 years ago. Aiden's breath caught in his throat. Had she been part of it all along? Was this her plan? His hands trembled as he closed the folder. Nothing made sense anymore. The woman who had appeared broken that night at the bus stop, the woman who had looked him in the eyes with gratitude, who had offered him trust, a chance, a new path, was now someone he couldn't fully read. Either she was caught in something much darker than she let on, or she had been playing him from the very beginning. He left the archive room in a daze. No one stopped him. No one followed. But as he exited the building and stepped into the empty night air, he saw something that made him freeze. The same black SUV was parked across the street. Engine off. Windows tinted. Silent as ever. This time the door opened, and Amelia stepped out. But she wasn't alone. A man followed behind her, a face Aiden didn't recognize. Older, sharp eyes, dark suit. The same man from the blurred photo. Amelia looked different too. No fear.
No hesitación.
She crossed the street quickly and stood in front of Aiden. I told you to wait for the signal, she said softly. Why didn't you? I got the files, Aiden replied, his voice barely a whisper. I saw everything, including the photo of you. Amelia's face didn't change. She didn't deny it. She didn't explain. She just looked at him, as if waiting for him to decide whether or not to run. The man behind her finally spoke. You want to know what's real? You'll get your answers. But you need to come with us. Now, because if you stay here, you won't last the night. Aiden stared at them both, the cold wind biting at his skin, his thoughts spinning in every direction. He had walked into this thinking he was helping someone. Now he wasn't sure who the villain really was, or if he'd been walking beside one all along. And in that moment, standing alone, folder in hand, truths unraveling faster than he could grasp, Aiden realized something terrifying. The jacket he gave away that night didn't just warm a stranger. It had opened a door that could burn down his entire world. Aiden stood still, staring at Amelia and the man beside her. The weight of the folder in his hands felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just documents anymore. It was betrayal, secrets, and a truth he never asked to carry. The street was silent around them, too silent, as if the entire city had stepped back and left only the three of them suspended in a moment that could explode in any direction. Why should I go with you? Aiden asked, voice low but sharp. You told me you weren't part of this. You said you were trapped. But I saw that photo. You were right there, signing the same documents you claimed you were fighting against. Amelia's expression didn't crack. She didn't raise her voice or try to defend herself. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes locked with his. That picture, it's real. I was there. But I wasn't agreeing with them. I was setting them up. The man beside her nodded, his face serious. She's been working undercover inside her own company for over a year. You think you were dragged into this by accident? You weren't. You were chosen. Aiden blinked, stunned. What? Amelia took a deep breath. We needed someone clean, someone with no ties to the company, someone who couldn't be tracked or corrupted. That night at the bus stop, it wasn't part of the plan. But when you gave me your jacket, without asking for anything in return, I knew you were the person we needed. You're telling me this was all part of some test? He said, a bitter edge in his voice. No, she said softly. That part wasn't planned. That was real. But once I realized who you were, I had to bring you into this carefully. I didn't want to use you. I wanted you to understand what you were fighting for. Aiden felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Everything he'd believed up until now was unraveling. The documents, the meetings, the SUV, even the threats, they had all been part of a bigger web. But he still didn't know who was pulling the strings. And him? He asked, nodding toward the older man. Elias Monroe. The man introduced himself. Former intelligence. I now work with a private task force that investigates deep corporate corruption. We've been building a case against WDR for years. Amelia has been feeding us data quietly from the inside. You were the final piece. And why me? Aiden asked again. What makes me so important? Because they trust you, Elias said. And more importantly, you weren't supposed to know anything. That gave us a window. Amelia looked at him. You found the files. You asked the right questions. You kept going even when it got dangerous. We needed that. You gave us something no agent, no board member could, human proof. A real person, standing up without power or protection. Aiden stared at her, overwhelmed. So what now? Elias pulled out a small device from his pocket. Now we leak the truth. We expose everything. But it has to be done smartly. If we rush, they'll bury it. If we go too slow, people will disappear. We have one shot. He handed Aiden a flash drive. This contains everything. Every transaction, every fake project, every name. You deliver it to the media outlet we've secured. It has to be you. Anyone else. And they'll assume it's just another political move. But once this is out, Aiden asked, won't they come for me? Amelia stepped forward. That's why you won't be alone. We've secured protection. Once the handoff happens, you'll be moved out of the city for a while. Start fresh. Aiden looked down at the flash drive. It was small, light, but it held the weight of an empire built on lies. He nodded. 2 hours later, Aiden stood outside the media building, his jacket zipped tight, the city lights casting long shadows around him. He took a breath, walked inside, and handed the drive to the journalist waiting with a sealed envelope. No words were exchanged, just a nod. The story was about to break. By morning, it was everywhere. News outlets ran the headline. Westcorp corruption uncovered. Millions stolen from public welfare funds. Photos, documents, names, every piece of evidence was made public. The fallout was instant. Arrests were made. WDR was dissolved. Public protests erupted. People demanded answers. Justice. Aiden watched it unfold from a safe house outside the city. He barely slept. He couldn't stop thinking about the lives affected. The mothers who never got shelter, the veterans promised care, the kids whose names were used to cover fraud. But he also felt something new. Something quiet but powerful. Peace. 1 week later, he received a message on the secure line from Amelia. We did it. But there's one more thing you need to know. They met in a small cafe on the outskirts of a town no one could trace. She looked lighter, freer, but her expression still held something unsaid. What is it? Aiden asked. Amelia looked down, then back at him. The leak worked, but not everything in that folder was true. He frowned. What do you mean? There was one photo, the one with me signing that document. It was real, yes. But the man beside me wasn't blurred out. Someone blurred it after we leaked it. Why? Because the man in the photo wasn't just anyone. It was my father. Aiden's heart skipped. He was one of the original architects of WDR. I didn't know at first. He kept me away from the inner workings. But when I found out, I knew I had to stop it, even if it meant exposing him. Aiden sat in silence, the twist sinking in like ice. I wasn't just fighting corruption, Amelia whispered. I was fighting blood. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time he saw the full weight she'd carried. You never had a choice, he said quietly. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness.
No.
But you did, and you still chose to help. Outside, the wind blew softly, a new morning rising. The city was changing, and so were they. But Aiden knew one thing now. The night he offered his jacket didn't just change someone else's life. It changed his too. Forever. Aiden stared at Amelia, his thoughts quietly spinning. Her words sat heavy in the air, simple, but filled with years of pain and buried truths. She had taken down a machine built by the very person who raised her. She hadn't just exposed a system. She had exposed her past, her legacy, and her own blood. There was no triumph in her voice, no pride, just quiet resolve, and maybe something close to peace. They sat in silence for a while, letting the weight of everything settle between them. Outside, the morning light poured through the windows of the quiet cafe, casting long streaks of warmth across the table. It was the same kind of light Aiden remembered from that night at the bus stop. Except this time, no one was shivering. No one was alone. I thought when this was over, I'd feel proud, Amelia finally said, fingers lightly circling the rim of her mug. But all I feel is tired. You should, Aiden replied. You fought a war most people wouldn't survive. She gave him a small, tired smile. And so did you. He shook his head. I just followed a gut feeling. Exactly, she said. That's what made you different. You didn't need a title or a strategy. You just saw someone in the cold and did the right thing. For a long time, Aiden had believed his life would never be more than grease-covered uniforms and late-night deliveries. But now he saw things differently. Not because he had brought down a corrupt empire, but because he had finally understood the value of being decent when no one's watching. That one moment, giving away a jacket to a stranger, had led to a chain of events that exposed hidden crimes, helped communities, and forced powerful people to answer for what they'd done. But it also gave him something else. Clarity. In the weeks that followed, the media storm around WestCorp slowly began to fade, replaced by trials, hearings, and policy changes. Amelia stepped down from her position as CEO, refusing any golden handshake or protection. She testified openly and offered full cooperation. Her actions divided the public. Some saw her as a whistleblower, others as a traitor to her family. But Aiden knew the truth. She didn't do it for approval. She did it because she couldn't live with herself if she didn't. The flash drive Aiden had delivered became one of the most talked about exposures of corporate fraud in recent years. The keyword WestCorp scandal flooded search engines. Journalists called it a case study in moral courage. But Aiden didn't want attention. He quietly declined interviews and stayed out of the spotlight. What mattered to him wasn't the recognition. It was the lives that had quietly begun to change because of it. The Southridge shelter, once an empty building with shuttered windows, was now open. Real families walked through its doors. Meals were served. Kids played in safe spaces. Aiden visited once, standing at a distance as a young mother helped her toddler climb up the porch steps. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Just seeing it was enough. Leo, the janitor who first warned him about the shelter, had been offered a community position with one of the recovery programs. Mara, the outreach director who had quietly warned him to stop digging, was now helping rebuild the trust that WestCorp had broken. Even the man from the garage, his old boss, had left him a voicemail saying, "Didn't know I had a hero fixing brakes in my shop. Proud of you, kid." Aiden didn't feel like a hero. He still had doubts, still had fears. But now he knew they didn't define him. One morning, weeks after the final leak, Amelia called him again. This time, it wasn't about a secret meeting or a mission. "I'm leaving the city," she said, "heading somewhere quiet. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to fix everything." "You deserve that," Aiden replied. "I want to build something again," she said. "But this time something small, honest. Maybe a program that trains kids from underprivileged neighborhoods in tech and trade skills. No sponsors, no headlines, just real work." He paused. "Sounds like something I'd want to help with." She smiled through the phone. "Then help me, if you're ready." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out the window of his apartment, the same one they'd placed him in weeks ago. His old jacket hung on the back of the door, patched, worn, and now part of a story no one would ever fully understand. He thought about everything he'd been through, the fear, the choices, the truth, and then he smiled. I'm in. Months passed. The city moved on, as cities always do. New headlines replaced old ones. But the impact of what happened remained, in courtrooms, in boardrooms, and in the quiet lives of those who had once been forgotten. Aiden never chased the spotlight. He never told his full story. But in a small town not far from the city, a community center began to grow. It didn't look fancy. It wasn't built with glass and marble. But it had warmth. It had purpose. And it had people who cared. And sometimes, on cold evenings, Aiden would walk past the center and see a young man or woman struggling. Unsure, nervous, alone. And he'd take off his jacket and offer it just like he did that night. Because what he learned was this: you never know who someone is when you meet them in their worst moment. You never know how much your kindness might change the direction of their life. Or yours. That night at the bus stop didn't make Aiden a hero. It just reminded the world how powerful one simple act of compassion can be. And in the end, that was enough.